Hello everyone. Here's a video, hopefully just one, might be two, for adding animation modifiers to your animations for the intent of adding like footstep sounds and other things like that. So that we can hear our guy walking around, but not when jumping, obviously. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do it so that we can figure out the way to do it easily. Stay tuned. So what we find ourselves, for my project here, I'm basically removing or wanting to implement the Lyra motion system, like so many others. But you open up your content browser into the locomotion files here for in Lyra, and there's so many of them, right? And that wasn't very many, but here's the rifle. That's all the male and female ones and everything else. And you open one of those up, and they've got all these cues in them. For the sync markers and all of the notifiers for the footsteps, and then they've got a special one for these context effects, which is where you would actually end up placing your audio cue. And what I've seen in the one course I'm completing, I know that they want us to learn things, but what they have us doing is scrubbing through the timeline, and you're placing, these sync markers, like one at a time at each spot, and you're going, wow, this is crazy, and then you're lining up when you want your footstep to hit the ground and all of that kind of thing, right? And one thing I've learned, and everybody else probably eventually would learn this as well, I hope to show that here, is that these all are added with animation modifier, basically macros. And what I was having a problem with is, where do you find what modifier actually is present on one of these? Because the way that they're added is you right click here and it says, you can say animation modifiers, and it's add modifier, out of date modifier, but where were the modifiers, right? So if I go back into there, you'll see that I've got this animation modifier tab here. Well, that is here, animation data modifiers. It's a window that you can add, and that's where it'll show up. And then like your normal preview scenes and all that stuff's up here. But so here's your animation data, and here are the names of the blueprints that are adding these tabs to this animation. And so that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to go and I'm going to show you how to put these in very easily. So let's continue with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this one down. I know I messed with it a bit, but close that one out. Go back to my content browser. I made one here for our tutorial. It's basically that exact same animation. I just removed all of the tracks from it. So I'm just going to spin it around here. And we're going to be concentrating on the feet, so we'll go there. Stop him from walking. And let me get rid of this. Okay, so if you're starting with a blank animation, this is what you've got. And the first one that we want to add is the foot sync modifier. It's a modifier that, I don't know exactly how that works, but when you're trying to synchronize different animations together, these will be the markers that the engine will use to match the animation locations from one set to another. So I've seen videos, people going through and detailing the creation of this particular modifier. But what I'm going to show you is that I'm in 5.11 here, that if you enable the plugin, because it's an experimental plugin, and it's let's type in modifier. Oh, if I spell it right, animation modifier library. So make sure that you enable that, and then obviously restart your engine to your editor to have that applied. With that in place, and if you look under your engine content and set your settings to show the plugin content, and we'll go down and we'll find the animation locomotion library content, animation modifiers, and here's the one, the sync marker animation modifier. So this is the blueprint for that. Not going to really go through this one. It's a good spot to you can learn a few things about how it's doing. It's all pretty straightforward. It just looks complicated because they made it all nice, but we're going to do that for the next one. But it's basically getting the track names and what notifies to add to it. Breaking down the sequence length by a sampling step, and then creating a time index out of that, and then setting the marker. This has an additional function to it, which is obviously more complicated, and why I wouldn't want to go through this one. But again, a great spot to learn about how things work. So you can, this one basically finds the ball of the foot and determines what time in the animation does it pass the location of the root bone, and then sets the marker for that. Okay, so that's our event graph that's already built and part of the engine, right? Now it might change because it is I think it is still somewhat experimental. Maybe they've passed it up a little bit further than that. But all we have to do here in our animation is we go to add modifier, and we come down here, and here's our sync marker animation modifier. It says it's out of date. It doesn't mean that it's out of date as in like there's a newer version of it. It means that it hasn't, the information that's in this animation is not current to the having this applied. So if we just select this and then apply it, bingo. So here's our first step of our animation sync markers, and every foot is right there where the ball of the foot crossed the root bone. So that was easy, right? So that was step one. So the next part is in the in our Lyra version. Now let's create and go through how to add these footplant markers for both left and right foots. Okay, right back after this. So let's add those footplant modifiers. So first of all, let's go into our content browser, create yourself a folder for animation modifiers, or organize it however you want. What we want to do is right click into here and go add a new blueprint class. Drop down the all classes below, and we're going to come down to animation modifier. Now there's some that are created here, obviously, and we could subclass out of those, but we want just the basic animation modifier. So you can select that, right, and it'll create yourself a new animation blueprint. name it. I've named mine AM for animation modifier, footplant notify. And so that's mine. And I'm going to just open it up. So this does use the experimental class animation modifier. So, it will subject to change, but, I think it's pretty good. I don't think there will be a lot of changes, but, but just be aware of that. I'm not going to actually build it while we go. I'm just going to explain it because otherwise it might just take too long. And the example is I basically recreated this exactly out of the Lyra one. And so you can always go to it if you don't see what you're expecting to see from here. And you can find out anything else. But hopefully I can explain it for you here. There's two events in an animation notifier. Animation modifier is the on apply and on revert. You just can get to those from the right click, and we can just go to on apply, and you can select that, and I've already got it in here. And similarly for the on revert. Those are the two. Those are those apply and revert commands that are in here when you go to apply it. So the main event is apply the modifier. So it's going to take the animation sequence that you've applied, that you've set for this, and it's going to throw it into this function. So let's go in there. So this one takes, I named it as an input animation sequence because I was getting very confused with anim sequence, and anyways. So that's what I did here, and you can do the same. Just add an input, and it's public, and I don't think there's any special settings here for it to work. And anyways, we go into our animation modifier, and here's the, this looks pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at it. So here we're coming in with our animation sequence. Excuse me. First of all, before we want to start is, this is something that you're going to be probably messing with a lot over your development time, and you might have other animations that come in with a bunch of notify tracks on it already that you either want to overwrite or get rid of and that kind of thing. And here is the array of names of the notifies to remove. Now the Lyra ones came in with AN footplant left, AN footplant left or right, and then their class component ones too with the underscore C. And so for myself, as I was doing this to learn all of this, I said, okay, well, you know what? I want to remove all of those ones too. And then I'm going to create and make my own animation notifies to put back in, basically to make the animations my own, so that I understand what's been working on them. And also, if something breaks later, I know that it might be related to this, and then I can learn a little bit more on how to fix that. So these we just add and then just type in the names, but we want these to actually be created, right? So let's look at that before we go further. So in your content browser, I've made a subdirectory here, notifies. Again, I'm just following along with what Lyra had set up in theirs. And here are my two animation notifies. They're a special class. You get to those by going right click, blueprint class, and if we can just scroll down if you want, and there's animation notify. And here we can see these ones are the ones that Lyra created, and they actually subclassed from one to the other, which is fine. But I just made mine straight up new animation notify. So you can select animation notify and select, and you'll be brought to one of these. You can name it however you would like. I wrote AN for animation notify, foot right, and I did a foot left. You can set the color. And that's pretty much all that you need to do. what you could also do is you could create a full blueprint in here, and create functions for it to run. I did not do that. I just want the marker to do the marking. Let other modifiers and other parts of your code grab that and then do things. Let's just keep it simple. So that's how we created those. And so that's how we can start off with. Let's remove all those. We're going to loop through them. And for each step in the one, we're going to remove animation notify events by name. It's a built-in node. And we're going to feed it our input animation sequence and give it the notify name. Once we're done, we're going to go through our foot definitions. Okay, our foot definitions is an array of structs. So let's look at that. So we'll go back to our content browser. And if I go under my animation modifiers, I created a new blueprint structure here. To do that, blueprint. I think there's a easier way. We can go to blueprints and structure. Okay, I called mine S for structure, animation modifier, AM, footplant definitions. Okay, if we open into that, we've got three variables. We want a bone name, so that's the bone that we're going to be tracking. We want the notify track name, the track that we want it to show up on, and the notify type. So it's an animation notify class, and that's why we created those animation notify left and right in our animation notifies. Those are what we're going to pull from that. So now that we have our struct, right, in our variable here, we can create our new variable. We created our notifies to remove, and that was a type name and an array. Our foot definitions are a type struct animation modifier footplant definition. It's a mouthful. And these are instant editable, so get the eyeball set for them all, or do the checkbox, however you like to do it. But now we're going to process this or set them up. So for each of our foot definitions, so left and right, you could have multiple, like if you were doing a big spider or something, I guess. We're going to loop through each one of those, and we're going to process it. Okay, and we're going to throw our input animation sequence into anim sequence. This is where I started to get a little bit lost on which one's which. So this is, again, another custom function that is built inside this this modifier. So if we go into that, so this one's a little more complicated, but it's basically looks like 3 steps, right? So here we come. Step one is we are going to get our foot definition. This is just the foot definition that I got from the side here. You know, get it, and then I just no, that's not that one, sorry. That is the foot definition that was fed in. So we get to that by we get our foot definition, right? And then I just split the pin. Okay, so it's nothing fancy there. And we just want the name, and we want to add the track name. And we're going to set a local variable of has foot unplanted, and we're going to set it to false. Okay, that's just to zero out our process here. So we added our track and we set this to false. Step 2 is we want to get our foot position. And since it's the first time through, we're going to call this our last foot position. So from our animation sequence, we are going to get our bone name that we're searching on, and we're getting it at time 0, and we are going to get its location and set our last foot location. Okay, this is just this is a function that we are going to define. So this is a new pure function. That's why it looks like a real node. I'll click into it just so that you know that we will be building it. But we're going to look at that after, so that we can make if you want, you can make a function with an input animation sequence, a bone name, and a time value float with return value of a transform. Okay, and then click it as pure, and then you can compile that, and then you can drag it in, and we can set this up. We can set the actual function up after. The third step is we want to go through the animation sequence and just kind of discretize it in a certain number of steps. And that granularity is I guess up to you by setting a couple of different values here, and you can play with them and see how it affects it or how it changes it. For the most part, I don't think you'd perceive the difference because the steps are, in the hundredths of a second. But so how does it work? It takes our input animation sequence. So again, this is get anim sequence. That's our input variable, right? We get the sequence length from it, and we're going to divide it out by this sample step. So this sample step, right, a new variable float. And in the Lyra project, it started it off at 1/80th of a second. Why, I don't know. It's a good value, I guess. Could be 100th of a second. That's whatever you want it to be, or you can play with that. Since this is all just applied once when you're creating your asset, it's not like it's something that runs constantly through the game. So you could do that with whatever you want. That's the granularity of your grid, basically. So now we're going to truncate that. So we divided the length of it by this. So now we've got, let's say, 112 steps in our animation. We just want the full value of that so that we can have an integer to stick into our loop. And we're going to go from index 1 to this last index. We multiply that last index by our sample step. So now we get it back as a time in the animation. And we can set a new value of current time. The next thing that we want to do is we want to get the current foot position. Okay, so we're going to get the animation sequence. We're going to put our bone in and the time. And here's that function that we are going to go through, and is part of this. It's the exact same function that we're going to use up here. The next step. So now we have our current foot position. We had our last foot position. Now we can calculate the current foot speed. How fast is this foot moving in our animation at this point in time? So speed is distance over time. So we take our current foot position, subtract our last foot position. We get its length in the XY plane. So we have a distance. We divide that by our delta time, basically our sample step time, and then we get a current foot speed. We're going to now update our last foot position variable with our current foot position. Okay. Again, these are just vectors. Both of these are just simple single vectors. Now, here's that has foot unplanted variable. So we know that we set it false to start with. And so let's look at that. So if the foot has unplanted, that means, if it was true, that means the foot is moving quickly, right? The foot is unplanted. It's not stuck on the ground. So let's look at true. It makes more sense. So the foot is wiggling around in the space. So if the foot is slower than the planted threshold, then it has planted and set the notify event and set unplanted to false. Well, which is what we're at right now. But this is, we're going to pretend it's true. Just because that makes more sense to me. Just do that one first. So our current foot speed, which we just calculated, and then there's this foot planted speed threshold. Okay, again, another value that you can play with depending on your animation. It defaulted here to be 110. To me, honestly, 100, whatever. It doesn't seem to really be too sensitive on this value. There's another value that we're going to use just down below here, which is foot unplanted speed threshold. That was one mistake when I was bringing it across from Lyra, is I thought these were both the same, but then I noticed that I wasn't getting the same result, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, they're two different values. Okay. So basically this unplanted one is kind of like twice the value, so now it's moving faster. So when it's moving really slow, then it must be planted currently. So what do we want to do? We want to add the animation notify event. This is a built-in function, and so it takes in our animation sequence. It takes in our foot definition, which we split to get the track name. And we got our current time, which we've calculated. And we're also, from our struct, we're going to use our notify type, and we're going to click, drag it in and add the notify class here. And then finally, we're going to set our has foot unplanted to false, because this was when our foot was planted, we're going to set this. And now we're going to say, now after this point in time, this foot is going to be unplanted. So since this was a loop, right, now we're going to go to that next index in time. So now we're a 100th of a second further along. We go through and set everything back up, but now we were unplanted. We were not unplanted, and so now we're going to come down the false. So now if the foot is moving quicker, then it's left the ground. It's unplanted, right? And so we get our current foot speed, which we've calculated. We've got this threshold, which is now 200. So it's like a double the value of this one. It's probably, you could probably even put the math in for that. I bet you that would work. But notice the one difference here is the greater and less than. So when it's greater than 200, in other words, it's like 1,000 or 2,000 or something big. So the foot's going quickly. If that's the case, then we're going to set it to be unplanted, because we're only adding this notify event when the foot is on the ground, right? Any other time, it's not. And that is the main event that is coming off of our apply modifier, right? And then it's the process the foot plant, which was the one that we just went through. And now inside here we had this special function. So let's take a look at that. Not overly complicated. There's a little bit of a brain scratcher in it, but there's some documentation on it, but we'll talk about that. So here's our function. And if you haven't set it up yet, so we want an animation sequence input object. We want a bone name, type name, a time of type float, and a return value of type transform. This output return value in a lot of the different functions in Lyra are work on the animation on a different thread, and they needed to be named return value, otherwise they don't work. So in Lyra, if you're working through it and you're finding your implementation isn't working, look at your output values, and if they've got it named return value, name it return value. It's a thing. So what does this one do? This one basically is going to transform the location of the foot bone or of whatever input bone that you've got, and translate it to get it into world space, component space, world space. I forget. Let's continue. So the first step that it does, it grabs our animation sequence and the bone that we want to find, and this find bone path to root is a built-in function. And that function returns the chain of bones that goes from the ball of the foot all the way to the root. So if I was to look at our skeleton tree here of our mannequin, and if I rolled some of the stuff up and I went to the left ball foot, that chain would be foot L, calf L, thigh L, pelvis to root, right? All of those bones get us to this location. So with that chain of bones, we now want to use this, get bone poses for time. So at a certain point in time, we get the location of all those bones in that one frame, right? And now we're going to loop through those locations of all of those bones, transforms of all those bones. And this is the part that hurts my head a little bit, but this is not a multiply node. This is a compose to transforms node. And so if you type in compose transforms, you'll get this node here. Okay. What it does is it will take your local transform and apply a rotation to it to return it in world space. Okay, because it does two different ways. And since we're starting with 0, that was our starting one, I guess. If somebody has a better explanation of this, I'd love to hear it, because the documentation is really no more than the tooltip. But it takes that local 0 transform and multiplies it by the item down the chain and sets our new value. And then it updates it from that one. It rotates it a little bit more to apply the next bones transform, and then the rotation that applies the next bones transform, and brings us all the way down to the ball of the foot. So that when we return, we're returning that last transform that sits us relative to, I guess, the 0, 0, which was probably our root, right? So now we know where that bone is. And that's what we return out of here. And that's all that component does. It made a lot of sense to me up until I got to here, and I got a little bit confused by this. I thought, why can't we just use the bone straight in and just get its transform? But that doesn't work. I don't know why, but maybe that might be something that they improve upon. Maybe they end up creating a more specific function for it, or like a direct function for it. But otherwise, this works. So that that gets us through all of the apply modifier. The revert one is the important one, is also very important, is because that gets rid of all of the stuff that you've put in and it'll take it all out. So what we want to do for that is we go in here, create a new function. We've got our input for our animation sequence. We got our foot definitions, and what we want to do is loop through our foot definitions and remove the animation notify track, which is a built-in function. And we're feeding it our animation sequence and the track name, and everything gets cleaned up. Okay. So with that done, if I went into our tutorial animation here of our guy running with a rifle, and if I go to add modifier and animation modifier footplant notify, that's the one that we just finished going through here. So I'm going to add that. It says that we're out of date. Here's those exposed variables that we've got set up, so we can play with them directly here. Anyways, and now I can here, and I go apply modifier, and there you go. We got our left and right foot, and if I scrub to that, boink, there it is. The heel's just starting to hit. This one, the heel's just starting to hit. Boom. Done like dinner. And now you can apply this, to hundreds of animations, and I'll show you that in a moment here. And then to revert that, you can always just then take it out, right? Or we could reapply it. There it is. We could play with some of these numbers. Let's take this one down to 75, right? Before I reapply it, I'm gonna put my marker right on here, and I'll zoom in, Control and mouse wheel. Let's see how much it really moves. So we're at 0.22 here, and I'm going to click this and say apply. So it moved from there to there. So depending on your animation, I think is where you're going to play with some of these values. But I'm pretty happy with the way those are setting, and so that's good for me. The next thing that we're going to do, I'm going to take a quick break here, is add an additional track here that puts the sound play, the sound cue in. So let me just be right back for that. Okay, let's add the sound cue so that we get our foot sound play, footstep when our foot hits. So here I've got one set here. Again, you go into Blueprint class. This is a animation modifier, and it is it's an animation notify, and it's a type play sound. There's a whole bunch of other ones in here that maybe I'll learn about in upcoming time, and I'll be able to post about it. And you can see that I've got mine already built here, but I'm going to say that you can go animation blueprint and then pick animation notify play sound, right? Select that, and then you'll start with this one here, and you can see its parent class is an animation modifier, but it's a special type for a playing sound. So we've got our events on apply and on revert, same as before. We've got a few variables here. We'll get those as we go. First thing I wanted to do, just to keep a bunch of crazy blue lines from being all over the page here, is I just promoted this to a variable. And we can move on from there. We got a two-step process, so a two sequence. So the first sequence is we're going to check if the play sound track exists on the animation, and if it's not, and if it's not there. So if it's not there, then we're going to add the track. So let's look at this. So first of all, let's start off with, does it have a track? And we're going to set that it does not. We're going to grab our animation sequence. We're going to get the set of track names, and we are looping through them. If the one that we are looking at is the play sound track that we want to use, so I've called mine foot sound effects, right? Name it whatever you want. And then you can go through the branch. If it's true, then we're going to say, hey, it already has that track, right? And then we're going to say, well, we're going to keep looking through them all. And if it's true, we're going to maybe set this hopefully only once, because it only should be in there once. Once we're completed, we're going to check to see if it has the track. If it doesn't have the track, right, this is where we're going to add it if it's not there. Maybe I should update that to say if it's not there. Okay. And how do we do that? We use the add animation notify track built-in node, give it the animation sequence, the play sound track name that you want it to be, and you can set a color if you want. The second step is we're going to add the play sound event for left or right foot on the play sound track that we've just set. So again, we're going to start with our animation sequence. We're going to get all of the notify events. So these are all of our footstep events, right, that our previous one did. All these yellow tabs here are animation notifies, right? And it's going to get anything else too that's a notify, but we're going to check for that. So now we're going to loop through all of those events, and it's a little bit more complicated in the Lyra one, but I've simplified it here because I don't understand how to do all of the stuff that one's doing in the context effects. Meaning, when if the ground is wood or stone or grass, and or water or whatever the sound is, or whatever other things that you might want the footstep to do, the context of it, right? And it's really powerful what they've done in Lyra, and I know that others have put this kind of system in as well. But to use that together with gameplay tags and stuff like that, for me right now is too much. And I think for most people, let's just get the sound cue playing, and we'll learn the next steps as we go. So we're going to start with the notify event. We're going to come off of that. We're going to break it, and we're going to really only, I don't even need this one exposed, to be honest. I just need the notify exposed. Okay, so we can hide all the other pins, and we can get the class of it, and we're going to compare that class to the class of our animation notify. So it's our animation foot left class. That's why we added that as a notifier as well. And we got the right side class here. So those, if our notify event is this class or this class, so the left or right foot, so we're going to say either one, because I want to basically, I guess you could set this up to be, left is different than right, and have the potential to have two different sounds. So if one foot's in the grass and one foot's on the wood, you'd get both. But I said, you know what, right now I'm going to just treat them both the same. If you wanted them to be different, you would basically duplicate this portion here for the left, and a different portion for the right, and you might have different play sounds coming out as a result. But we're going to treat them both the same, so from an OR, and if it's either one of those notifies, I want to add this notify event. So I want to add it to this animation sequence. I want it to be this play sound track on this track name. There are foot sound effects. The time is, again, coming off of our event. We're going to grab the notify event trigger time from it. So that'll be our start time and our notify class. Okay, so this is our animation play sound, my animation notify play sound default footstep. So that's something we need to create. So let's look at that. Let's go to our content browser, animation notify play sound footstep. So that is my animation notify play sound, right? Which is what we started with, right? I might have misspoke earlier when I said that for this animation modifier footstep, the one that we were just reviewing, was just an animation notify. That's why it was animation modifier. This is the play sound one, where I said to come in to the blueprint class and then down to the animation modifier, no, animation notify play sound. That, when created, will give us this play sound. That makes more sense. Because it has our sound cue, our sound to play. So I created a sound cue for it to play and gave it a color, and basically that's all that you need to set here. You could open it in an editor and maybe have some logic in here as well. Again, that left-right play sound situation, left foot, right foot. I'm going to keep them both the same. If we go to mine, and I'll open it up here, I've got 4 different types of grass. Well, it's actually all the same file. I've just mucked with the equalizer statement settings for it to create different volumes of each one, and then I've set different proportions just to randomize it a little bit. These grass wave sounds and such, I've got from a site that I'm blanking on at the moment, but let me just see if I find it here quickly. Okay, yeah, so I got all of these. I got a number of different footstep sounds and other sounds. If you go to gdc.sonnis, sonniss.com, I don't know why I got this open over here. You will find this free download bundle from Sonus. If you Google Sonus, what did I Google here? Sonus free sound effects, and go into the Reddit post there, you will find like all of the links and the discussion about every year at the GDC. This company provides an incredible amount of sound effects for free, royalty free, free for use in commercial, anything that you wanted to use. You can just come into here and you can just download all of the whatever it is, 40 some odd gigs worth of sound, unzip them all, and go through them and find ones that you like. There's a plethora of them, and obviously if you really want to see all of their stuff, there's an amazing number of stuff in there. They obviously sell them. That's how they do their business. But just seems to be a really great set. So I've just brought them in here. I've mucked with them again in my own audio editor and created my sound sequence. So here we got our sound sequence. And that is where we cue it into here. And that is what we're setting here. And then that's our on apply. And then we have our on revert again. So all I want to do is I want to get rid of that notify track. So let's look at that in action. So if I go in here, here's our gentleman's footsteps. We're going to add a modifier. I'm going to add my animation. Where is it? There it is, right at the top. Animation modifier, add footstep, play sound. Okay, I'm going to select it and apply. And there they all are. There's all my footsteps. And so they're all in there. I didn't have to try to line things up and zoom in and do stuff. Everything's automatic. Okay, that's the big takeaway there. So now let's look at. We've got a directory here. I'm going to go into the rifle ones here. And since I'm doing all my stuff on the the Manny one, I'm going to just search here for the MF ones because I don't want to mess with things that I've been working on. But what you do in this sense is, so if I open this one, and I'll get it playing here. So here's the what is this, a jog right. And it's got all this stuff. It's got a distance curve for some distant masking stuff, but we don't need to worry about that. But we want to add our modifiers to it, right? So it's got these ones in it, but I'm going to just say I want to add our foot plants and our sound. So I'm going to close that and then come here. I'm going to right click. Animation modifier. I want to add a modifier. I'm going to add our animation foot plant. And I'm going to add our footstep play sound. And then I'm going to apply them. And it's going to say, hey, these already exist because I'm pulling the ones off, the Lyra ones off, and I'm kind of reusing the same name. So I'm going to just say yes to all. And if I open that up, here is my yellow footsteps left and right, and here's our play sounds of our footsteps. I think I have to save it here to get them to play, or I have to. I noticed that it was one of those things that you need to reopen it. There they go. Okay. It didn't remove the Lyra context effect one because I didn't in mine. You could remove that, I guess. I think it even keeps it. I think that one's a hard one to delete, which is fine because I kind of want to learn how that one works anyway, so that's fine. But I put ours in, and we've got. I didn't change the foot sync markers because it's just using the exact same modifier, but. Now they're all in place, and what you can do then is you can say, "Yep, do them all," right? And then just go to your modifiers, right? And we're gonna add modifiers, and I'm gonna add our foot plant, and I'm gonna say apply. And unfortunately, it's going to say this for every one that you did. I'm going to just keep clicking yes to all of them. I probably should have done so many of them for the video. Maybe I'll just quickly pause that. Okay, I did them all. And if I open them up, I didn't do the play sound one. I just did the footstep. If I open up one, and there's this footsteps in whatever this one is. This is the right, rifle turn left 90, right? So just in that, oops, just in that little transitional kind of movement as they're turning, just this little boop, 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 right? And so if we go back to our map, and I push play here, that's that little sound. For that turn in place. And that's it. You got all of your animations now for running backwards and strafing and crouching. I think I got to make a different sound for crouching, make it a little bit quieter or something like that. But yeah, that's so much faster. I did once you got it set up, you're applying that to like 100 animations in literally instantly without having to push yes to all of the times that you're removing it. But as opposed to the insanity of aligning or copying pasting foot markers all over the place. So I hope that has helped describe or explain some of these nodes, and I know it's going to help me a lot because I'll be able to come back to this and be able to revisit what I knew, because that seems to become a thing now and then. Yeah, I hope you all enjoy your video, and if you've got any questions, the next steps, hopefully once I get the context effects figured out, I want to start to apply the game flag tags to make that transitions between the different points thing, and then I'll, if that becomes a good learning point, I'll make another video about that. Have yourself a great one. Hey, like and subscribe, I guess is what I'm supposed to say. Have a great day. Bye.